Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be talking about Invest 90L, which is currently off the shore of the southeast, but it will be making potential impact with parts of the Gulf Coast over the next couple of days and over the next week. We're going to be timing this out for you guys and giving you all the information you need to know, so make sure you are staying tuned all the way until the end. Here's a look at the current National Weather Service page. You can see that we have some excessive heat warnings in parts of Idaho and Oregon, as well as a few more parts of Missouri and Kansas. We have some red flag warnings in parts of Oregon, as well as a few air quality alerts just kind of scattered about in the Northwest. We have some flood watches in the southwest for areas of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and even a little bit of Nevada and California. And then we have some heat advisories up through the central part of the country. We have a few dense fog advisories in central Alabama, with a few more air quality alerts in parts of Indiana, Ohio, and a little bit of Kentucky as well. Yesterday, we had a high temperature of 118 degrees in Stovepipe Wells, California. We also had a low temperature of 26 degrees in Peter Sinks, Utah. And we had a highest rainfall report of 4.7 inches in Aztec Lodge, Arizona. No snowfall reports as of yesterday. So here's a look at Invest 90L. According to the National Hurricane Center, over the next 2 days or 48 hours, this storm has a 60% chance of development, and over the next 5 days, this storm also has a 60% chance of development. Right now, you can see that they basically just have a big circle around where the storm currently is for where it could develop. Over the next, I would say, 7 days, that circle or that zone would kind of extend into the Gulf of Mexico a little bit more, somewhat like this. We really have a not quite a good idea of what this storm is actually going to do. It could definitely make a track up further to the north and just kind of die out, not having too big of an impact. Or the more likely scenario as of now, but still not 100% certain, is that this moves into the Gulf of Mexico, kind of stalls out a little bit, and then maybe makes some impacts in terms of rainfall or maybe wind in parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, or Florida. So we still have a lot to clear up here, and we're going to be kind of tracking this out and giving you the two different scenarios that could happen with this storm later on in today's video. So here's a look at the current map of where Invest 90L is. It's currently right here over eastern Florida. It's located at 29.3 degrees north by 78.5 degrees west. Maximum winds of about 29 miles per hour or 25 knots. Minimum pressure of about 1,015 millibars. And currently, the National Hurricane Center doesn't have the movement of the storm updated just yet. So you can see it is just a few hundred miles or maybe just 100 miles offshore of Florida, and it's a few hundred miles north of the Bahamas as well. So it's still fairly far out there, but it is definitely moving closer to shore. And again, we still don't know whether this will be moving further to the north or whether this is going to be moving to the west into the Gulf of Mexico. I would say most likely it's going into the Gulf of Mexico, although I would still say maybe a 20 or 30% chance that this just kind of stalls out over the eastern Carolinas or eastern Georgia. Taking a look at the model track guidance, this is where you can kind of get an idea of how kind of in disarray all these models are. They really don't know which way this storm is actually going to track. You can see, I would say about half of the models, or almost exactly half of the models, are taking this to the west, west of Florida, into parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, maybe even the Panhandle. And then the other half are just kind of bringing this back, making it do a little bit of a circle, and then bring this back up through the Carolinas. By this point, once it would head back up through the Carolinas, I would not expect much more development. It would probably die out because we have a high pressure and a ridge which is building over the top of this area. So that'll help to break this apart if it does choose to move further north instead of moving to the west. Taking a look at the GFS model, you can see that the GFS model and its ensemble members are all going to the west, but it does do something a little bit peculiar. It brings them all to the southwest. It kind of moves it into the southern Gulf of Mexico, whereas the other models that went to the west were taking this up further to the north, closer to the coast of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So you can see how we still have discrepancy, even if we know the general direction that this will be heading in. these would be two completely different scenarios. In the bottom scenario, you would have this making potential rainfall impact or even landfall, depending on the exact track, with some parts of Cuba and Mexico and parts of Central America. In the other scenario, where it moves further to the north, you would have more impacts along the Panhandle and parts of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana as well. So we have two different scenarios, and I do think that even on the GFS model, they're probably going to spin this back up to the north just based on what it does at the end, where you can kind of see that some of them are tailing up a little bit. So if we were to extrapolate that maybe to the 7-day mark, maybe even the 10-day mark, you would probably see some of these move all the way up the coast and into parts of the Gulf Coast. Taking a look at the European model, you can see that these are also kind of split. The Canadian models are the ones in yellow. So you can see that the Canadian model is the one that's really wanting to bring this over the Atlantic and then move it into parts of the northern Atlantic as a very, very weak storm by that point. It wouldn't even be anything tropical by that point. The other European models are deciding to kind of move further to the west. So they're kind of going more in the direction that the GFS was taking. But again, we don't know whether this is going to be further to the south or further to the north. You can see that the ones that go further to the south, instead of curving back up through Louisiana, they curve into parts of Texas. So they kind of take a broader turn and move somewhat like this. The ones that move further to the north just kind of stick around the coast and kind of stall out there over the next few days and weeks. So again, we have two different scenarios, two very different scenarios that would have two very different impacts and outcomes depending on which one we actually do get. Looking at the intensity guidance, it's fairly high chance that this does become a tropical storm. I would give it a 60-40 split of becoming a tropical storm, just because we're not too certain. A little shift in the track here and there, further to the north or further to the south, could definitely change this. If we find out that tomorrow that we're expecting this to kind of move a little bit further north and maybe stay on land for a longer period of time, then of course the intensity guidance will kind of bring that down a little bit. So, and while as of right now, you see 4 out of 6 models are bringing this to tropical storm status, we still don't know whether that'll actually happen, because who knows, maybe the next run we only have 2 out of 6 of the models, or maybe the run after we have 5 out of 6 of the models. So we can still see that a little bit of shift in the models, and we still don't have a ton of these running right now. We still only have 6 of these running. We don't have many more, and over the next couple of days they will start to run more and more of these models onto the storm to see what will happen in terms of the intensity and the track. This is why we have this discrepancy right here, and it's all to do with the upper air map. So I'm taking a look at the GFS right now. This is the GFS ensemble model, and let's just break down what's happening. We have a trough which was originally over the northeast, and now it's off the shore of the northeast. So this is an area of low pressure right here. Here is that cyclone. Here is Invest 90L. This is your main storm that you want to be tracking, and this is what we are kind of focusing on right now. And then we have 2 areas of high pressure. We have one that's going to be kind of stretching out over the top here in the northern plains, and then we have another one which is over Texas. So this is what, if this high pressure holds together, then we're probably going to see this kind of move into the Gulf and then curve back up. If this does not hold together, which it looks like most models have this high pressure on the bottom kind of breaking down, then what we would actually see is this kind of move further to the west and move almost into Texas. So we would have to see, still definitely very different model solutions are possible. But what is really important, what I think is the most significant, is that we have your low pressure down here. We have another high pressure which is just going to be building over the top, and this will actually extend most likely down through the Carolinas and into parts of the western Atlantic. So that'll kind of block off that northern spot, and this high pressure will kind of go away. So we're going to see this one break apart, and it won't really be there within the next couple of days. We're going to be met with a broad area of lower pressure, which should help the storm develop a little bit more. Taking a look at what the Canadian model does with this, and let's just fast forward this a little bit more. You can see that we have that high pressure now starting to build over the top, and the Canadian model doesn't have this fully building over the top. So the Canadian model does not bring this to the west. It just stays on the east side of Florida, but it's a very weak storm. If you were to look at how intense this is on an intensity graph, this would be a very weak storm. You're looking at maybe 1,010, 1,015 millibars at best in these areas. So really weak storm because this high pressure is preventing it from actually going anywhere, and you have another area of broader high pressure to the west, which is also preventing this from making a turn further to the west. So it's just kind of stuck in this little hole right here with not too much support, and for that reason, in this model solution and the Canadian model, you would just see this kind of stay around. You would see it maybe move up the coast a little bit, but as a very weak storm, mainly just providing rainfall. If we look at the European model, this is one of the models, kind of like the GFS model, which brings this further to the south. So you can see that this high pressure is a little bit more defined and builds over the top a little bit better. You also see that we have another high pressure to the west. This is going to help kick this to the west as well. And then that one that was in Texas and over northern Mexico, this breaks apart. So we don't have this high pressure anymore. This one is done, and that's going to mean that this storm can intensify over the Gulf of Mexico and potentially make a run at Texas, or maybe even move into Louisiana, or who knows, maybe even make a little bit further of a northward track. That is still all in question. I would say, again, the Gulf of Mexico option probably more likely because we have more models saying that that is what is expected. Although, again, I can't really rule out what the Canadian shows, where it just kind of sits on the east side of Florida and dies out. The European model will definitely have a stronger solution out of all of the models, because it is moving into the Gulf of Mexico, and it doesn't really have anything preventing it from just kind of staying there and intensifying over a period of a couple days. Taking a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies, you can see that these are definitely fairly warm enough waters. We're not dealing with anything that's super warm, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, but definitely nothing that's going to be too cold for the storm to develop. You can see that we actually have a little pocket of slightly warmer temperatures, sea surface temperatures on the west side of Florida, into the western Gulf of Mexico and the southern Gulf of Mexico, a little bit cooler, but again, it's basically just on 1 degree of normal, so it's really nothing that's going to be too significant either way. The sea surface temperatures really shouldn't play a big role in whether this develops or not. Taking a look at the ocean heat content, this could definitely help it develop. Now, this is also going to depend on the track. If this storm moves in from the west side of Florida and it moves into this little pocket of higher amounts of OHC, then you're probably going to see a brief period of intensification and higher than normal growth within the storm, and then it would probably drop off a little bit as it's moving nearer and closer to Texas. If this were to maybe take more of that northern route where it kind of moves just along the Gulf Coast and moves into Louisiana, then we're probably looking at a bit of a weaker storm just because it's going on land a little bit more. The northern flank would be on land, and also because it's missing out on this big pile of high OHC in parts of the central Gulf of Mexico. So that is definitely something that you want to pay attention to. The exact track in relation to this ocean heat content could definitely play a big role in the development of these two storms, or in this storm right here. Taking a look at the rainfall, and this is in the amount of inches of rainfall we're dealing with. You can see that the entire Gulf Coast, for the most part, all the way up to Louisiana, is dealing with at least an inch of rainfall, and also through the entire state of Florida. You get further north of there, and we're looking at maybe half an inch to even as low as maybe 3/10 of an inch or a quarter of an inch. So not as much as you get further to the north, but we definitely have some ample amount of rainfall in through the southeast. So that's definitely not going to be an issue. I also don't think that this is enough rainfall to really cause too much flooding. So it's not going to be a big rain producer either way, according to what the current model guidance is showing. So that is definitely a good sign. We're not expecting too much flooding out of this storm. And if we look at the maximum wind gusts, you can also see that this storm will be rather weak, at least throughout the next 5 or so days. And it's not really expected to make too many gains in terms of its winds. You can see that as of the next couple of days, as it's just stalling out over the eastern side of Florida, it will have some wind gusts in knots that could get up near 30 or 35, 34 knots. So that would be at tropical storm strength. It then moves into Florida in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's when it starts to potentially die off a little bit in terms of the wind speeds. You do see a little pocket of maybe 20 or 25 knot wind gusts, which would be around 30 to 40 miles per hour. But again, this is not enough to really classify this as some sort of big event. So either way, I don't think this will be a huge event, but it will definitely be interesting to track because this does have potential, especially if it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. Just right now, it looks like it'll be a weaker storm. We're still uncertain on whether the storm will move to the north or whether it'll move further to the west. And if it does move to the west, does it take more of a southerly route and then move into Texas? Does it take a southerly route and move to the north into Louisiana? Or does this take more of a northern track and just kind of stick around the Gulf Coast? So you can see how we have many different options, and I'll be tracking this over the next couple of days with you guys. That is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.